Hey everyone, welcome to the Blue Line Voice Blood, Sand, and Smoke podcast. I'm your host, Josh Waddell. Today, we have an awesome guest. He is a firefighter, 26 years at Paintsville, Kentucky. His family was in that fire department since the 1950s. He is one of the last historians of his department. He did 15 years in the Federal Bureau of Prisons. He is a liver transplant survivor, and he's a 3-time published author. Jimmy Williams, it's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So let's start with, where were you born? Where'd you grow up? And how did you get in the fire service?
Well, I'm originally from Eastern Kentucky. I now reside in Central Kentucky, but I'm originally from a small town in the mountains named Paintsville, Kentucky. I was born in Floyd County, but resided in Johnson County, Kentucky, which those two counties were neighbors to one another. And that little town itself has some history of its own. The Native American Cherokee Indians and the Shawnee Indians used to actually paint figures and different diagrams and stuff on the rocks that run through the creek. Was there at the creek that runs through the middle of the town. Hence the name Paintsville came from the name of Paint Creek. But I was born and raised in Eastern Kentucky. I'm a graduate of Paintsville High School in 1993, a veteran of the fire service of 26 years. When I got involved with the fire department, even though I was at a very young age, I never did really understand why my dad was taking me to fire. He would have me and my mom sit in the car while he was out taking care of whatever the call may have been, a car wreck or a structure fire, whatever the case may be. This was in the 70s. But as time progressed and I became a little older, getting closer to the age of 10, Dad would start sharing stories with me of certain fires that he had fought. And throughout this relationship with my father, he educated me on our family history with the department, being the Paintsville Fire Department. That department was established in 1926 by a group of men in the city of Paintsville known as the American Legion Post 117. So for the period of a year, Post 117 was the actual fire department. And then once the station was built and a truck was purchased, basically the city absorbed that department and began taking over the administrative side of it and the financial responsibilities of the department. But I've got an extensive family history with the department. My great uncle may have been a volunteer firefighter in the 40s. He was born in 32. I'm not real sure when he actually started, but I know that I had a family member by marriage start right around 1952 or 53, and he was chief for a couple of years. His name was Lee France Rigsby. And then my great uncle, which would be on my father's side, my grandmother's baby brother, he was fire chief for a period of 18 years, where he started, I believe it was in 1958 that he started, which ran all the way up to 1976. And just over the years, my dad had 18 years. And when I started in October of 84, my dad still had maintained quite a bit of friendships through his colleagues at the fire department. My dad only left the department because he switched over into politics and become a city council. And he thought it might be a conflict of interest of being part of two entities like that, showing favoritism toward the department. But something I've always reflected on with my father after he got into politics, he was actually responsible for making the motion to purchase the first set of Jaws of Life and the first rescue truck for the Paintsville Fire Department. That's something I'm very proud of. And when he passed away in 2009 and I spoke at his funeral, this was something that I let everybody in the congregation know that was part of my father's achievements. But my father always enjoyed and loved the fire department. I still have his red light and his fire helmet, as well as some other stuff, his old badges and all that. But just a vast history through it with my family in the department.
How old were you when you got into the junior fire service?
I was 10 years old. Actually, 2 months shy of being 10 years old. Two or 3 months. October of 84. My birthday's in January. So I was 2 months shy of being 10 years old. Kind of ironic because my best friend, his name is Kyle Williams. We share the same last name, but we're not related. But my birthday's on the 11th of January. His is on March the 11th. So I'm 2 months to the day, literally older than he is. But we started at the same time, same history with the department. Probably could share a lot of the same stories. He may even be able to share something I forgot about over the years. But at a very early age, although we were not allowed to fight fire, we were not allowed to really do anything on an emergency scene immediately. We were allowed to attend the fire drills. We were allowed to stand around and listen to the instructors, perform the training, ask the questions, and often I would be asked questions just like my friend Kyle. And throughout the late 1980s, one of the first fires that I was actually allowed to fight was at a small motel that we had in Paintsville. It's referred to as the Starfire Motel. The It's still there at this time, only it's been transitioned into apartments now. But that place has burnt 3 or 4 times, and I was on multiple fires at that location, as well as death scenes. But it's amazing what that little town, all the stories that's been preserved over the years. But forest fires, Eastern Kentucky's full of the Appalachian Mountains. We're part of the Appalachian chain of mountains that stretches from Pennsylvania down into Georgia, through Tennessee and Kentucky, Virginia, West Virginia. So we're in that belt of mountains. And when forest fires take off in the Appalachian region, man, they're usually pretty bad.
So what did you think that when you came in, what did you think the fire service would be, and what did it turn out to be?
Well, the thing that always drew my attention was the red lights and sirens. I mean, even at an early age, as junior firefighters, we were allowed to ride inside the cab of the fire trucks. We actually had a Dalmatian named Lady. And one of the trucks we had equipped with a seatbelt specifically for Lady. And either myself or Kyle, we'd sit in the cab and take care of the dog while they were out, fighting fire or working a car wreck. Back in that time, we had a major roadway that went through Paintsville, and it wasn't uncommon to work 2 or 3 wrecks a day just because of the coal trucks and a lot of traffic up and down Route 23, U.S. Route 23, which stretched from Virginia all the way up into northern Kentucky. And back in those days, it was only a 2-lane road, but now, since then, it's evolved into a 4-lane road.
You rose to the ranks in the fire department. What did leadership teach you going through that process?
Basically, one step at a time. Don't get in too big a hurry. Sometimes you'll forget the obvious, might overlook something while trying to make a decision. And it was a gradual process, but I got to learn it very early on. And I've served with 3 different departments throughout my career in the fire service, and throughout these other volunteer departments that I've worked with. The ranks that I've held was lieutenant, captain, assistant fire chief. At that time, as the assistant fire chief, I was the lead instructor for the department. And anytime we had training, I was the one teaching, or I was bringing in specialty instructors based upon the topic at hand. And it was an experience. I had a lot of great teachers. I still keep in touch with friends who were assistant fire chiefs and a chief. I talk to them regularly. And it's just a blessing to have been surrounded by a bunch of great men and see how their hands-on application, how they would perform. And you take that information and apply it to your own judgment, your own skill, and try to improve upon that and not make, simple mistakes. Because, when you're working an emergency, as well as I do, in those situations, things are chaotic. You don't always know every little detail that's taking place. And you definitely want to be on your game. You don't want to take no chances and forget something. And you have to stay abreast of new techniques and new technologies that come out in this day and time. Back in those days, new technologies was not as often back in the 80s and 90s. But this day and time, there's something new coming out once a week, if not more than that.
Let's talk about what you're doing as one of the last historians. Can you dive into that a little bit and talk about it, and talk about your book as well?
Absolutely. I over the last 10 years or so, even though I've not been directly involved with the fire department, I would have friends reach out to me and ask me about specific events that has happened in the history of the department, mainly large-scale structure fires, historical buildings, and things of that nature. And I've had several friends mention to me, say, you ought to put this down on paper. Someday there's going to be an audience that will want to know this information, and they don't really have anywhere to go to get it because you old people are dying off. Well, that's a true statement. We are dying off. But I took it upon myself to start collaborating with some old friends and just asking about some old stories, some events that had occurred that I had forgot about, or maybe didn't remember it in the correct order that it actually had happened. And the first book that I'd written is actually titled The Biography of a Small Town Boy Who Was Born into a Life of Public Service. This book right here that I'm showing you. And this is my biggest book right now. It's about 60,000 pages. I forget how many pictures are in there. But I dive into my family history into the department. All the members of my family who has been active in that department, I've put their name and their information in this book as well, so they could kind of see how my family connections spread out throughout that one particular department. And all this information that I have delved into is just historic events that has occurred, and maybe special people that's been involved with the fire department that we've lost over the years. And the first book was literally just my biography. Well, after some of my friends had read the biography, they said, well, you didn't really dive into the history of the apparatus and the stations all that much. You need to do another book. Okay, so I did. This one right here. 1926 Legacy. This book specifically talks about everything about the Paintsville Fire Department. I talk about all the fire chiefs. I talk about all the equipment, all the trucks. I have pictures of all the trucks in this book. I have pictures of historical fires that happened in Paintsville, some of the largest fires that has happened, as well as in this current time, this current day, how the department continues to grow and evolve with technology, with new training techniques. And although it's a small department which only operates out of 2 stations, that department's held its own for a long period of time. These small town departments, one of their biggest struggles, especially for the city of Paintsville, has always been trying to work with the city administration, the mayor and city council, because they have their own agenda when they want to spend money. There's certain things. It's like in the city of Paintsville. I don't know why, but for some reason, the country club, the golf course was always their priority. They cared more about it than they cared about anything, which always upset all the firemen and the policemen. We couldn't stand it. It just irritated us so much. Are you going to call the golf course if your house is on fire? Go play around the golf? But the fire department is an important thing only when you need it. When they're sitting on the sidelines and they're not right in front of you, you don't really think about it as often. But the fire department has to continually evolve, continuously train. You're required so much training a month that your members are required to meet so many times a month to train, collaborate, learn these new technologies or techniques. And it's just aggravating sometimes when you have to deal with the politicians because they always get in the way. And that's it. That's all across the United States. That's not just in Paintsville, Johnson County. That's nationwide. Politicians are the worst thing for a fire department. The firefighters run the fire department, not the politicians. And it's very important that the firemen, there's a brotherhood there, just like in law enforcement, just like in the military. There's a brotherhood there. There's a bond. We watch out for one another. We save each other's back. We're there if your brother goes down. I can remember a structure fire, a Ponderosa Steakhouse in Paintsville. Me and my partner, Mike Faulkner, his nickname on the department was Smoothie. We made it the first interior attack on that structure. Went into the kitchen, fully involved. I was on the nozzle. He was my backup. And the kitchen was fully involved, a lot of heat, a lot of the ceiling was already coming in. The building had started collapsing at this point, and right in the middle of things, he had a heart attack, or at least it was believed to be a heart attack. And when I saw that he was in trouble, drop the hose line, grab your partner, get out. And we just traced the hose line back out and got him outside, and I let the chief know, hey, chief, it's coming down. Hit the evacuation, hit the horns. For 15 to 30 seconds, you blow the air horns on the truck to let everybody know that's inside the structure, because there was another team in the front part of that building where we were in the back side going into the kitchen. But we evacuated that structure. And once we got my partner out, the ambulance personnel evaluated him. They ended up flying him out to a trauma center because it was believed that he had had a heart attack. Unfortunately, it was very minor, but it still could have been very serious. And the business itself was a complete loss, but everything that we were supposed to do was done. We saved the surrounding structures, the other businesses, and we contained that fire. Although the building or the business was a total loss, we did contain the fire to that one location where it was actually at. Because it was in the Plaza Center of Paintsville where a wide variety of businesses exist, other restaurants, retail, things along those lines. But, we were very fortunate that his injuries were not severe, and he's still okay today. I still talk to him pretty regularly, still a good friend. And just over the years, everything that's happened at the fire department, one of the things I'll touch on that caused me to leave the fire department in 2008. 2008 is probably one of the worst years in my life, and I'll tell you why. I had recently went through a divorce where I had got full custody of my daughter. So I was raising my daughter on my own. I had a mother who was dying. She was in the hospital. And I actually had a lady who was working for me that helped me with my daughter as far as taking her to school and picking her up on the days I was working at the fire station. But January the 22nd, 2008, 9:06 a.m., our ambulance responded to a motor vehicle accident, which was believed to be minor on US 460, about 5 miles outside of Paintsville to the west. And although the accident itself was minor, this was in the time of year where Eastern Kentucky deals with a lot of winter precipitation. And as a result of this, the patient was able to get out of the car. And the only reason we actually went to the accident, she was afraid that maybe an injury could have harmed her unborn child that she was still carrying. She was near her delivery date, but she was more concerned about her child than she was for herself. So she called the ambulance. So you have one ambulance and you have a deputy sheriff on scene. He's taking care of traffic control while the EMS personnel are attending to the patient. Well, in the process of walking from the automobile, which was in a ditch line against the hillside, along the roadway, down the roadway side of the ambulance, where the ambulance was parked because it was on the shoulder of the road, with them not knowing, the roadway's already slick, icy, a little bit of snow on the ground. Two coal trucks, tractor trailer coal trucks, were going eastbound on 460. Well, where that location was at, it was in a curve. It was a blind curve. You couldn't see to the other side of it. The drivers of those coal trucks were not aware that there was an accident that was in progress or taking place. Well, as the first coal truck starts through the curve, he sees the police car, which was parked about 15 to 20 feet behind the ambulance, and he starts applying his brakes. Well, in that process, the trailer portion of his semi broke traction and began sliding toward the police car and toward the ambulance. And another friend of mine who was the deputy, James Preston, he and the EMT, or the driver of the ambulance, was at the rear of the ambulance getting the cot out to put the patient on, put in the back of the ambulance. Well, in the process, the deputy saw that the coal truck had broke traction, started sliding toward the emergency vehicles. He grabbed the EMT, threw him over the hood of the police car because by this time the cruiser had already been struck and is starting to slide toward the back of the ambulance. He threw Brian over the hood of the police car into the ditch line. He dove into the ditch line immediately to follow. This is how it was explained to me. And at the same time, Krista, the paramedic, and the patient was walking down the side of the ambulance. Sadly, the bed of the coal truck pancaked Krista against the side of the ambulance, resulting in her death. The patient fell to the ground, and that outcome was also fatal. But it was a very tragic event, and it's always haunted me because I was supposed to be on shift that day. I was supposed to be on shift at Station 2, where I was the senior firefighter, and I oversaw two apparatus, a rescue pumper and an aerial truck, a 75-foot Quint. I had to take off due to family reasons because of my daughter. I had to go to court on behalf of my daughter. And once everything had been completed, I had actually, while all this was taking place, I'd actually stopped at a restaurant and got some breakfast and went to Station 2. I was going to go over there and visit with everybody since I had already taken care of my responsibilities. I had sat down and started eating, and all of a sudden, I hear across the radio, Hallby Hall, for God's sakes, please answer your radio. And that was the second ambulance that had responded to the scene that got Krista, paramedic. They were performing CPR on her, what was referred to as a trauma code, taking her into the hospital. I had no idea what was going on because I'd been in court. My radio was off. And after I heard Terry's voice and I heard everything that he had said, by that time, our tones had set off for a rescue pumper to respond to that accident. I dropped everything that I had. I dropped my food. I grabbed my gear and I jumped on the rescue and I responded out there. I didn't even wait. And I got halfway out there and the chief stopped me. He turned me around. He said, there's nothing you can do on scene. I need you to get to the hospital. We've got something going on there. I really wasn't sure exactly what he was referring to, but I didn't waste no time getting there, running lights and siren and everything. But once I got to the hospital and I seen all of our personnel huddled up and crying, I knew it was something tragic. I walked over and I whispered into one of my friends, one of my colleagues' ear, and I said, "What's going on? What's taking place?" I said, "It's Krista, man. She's in there. They're coding her right now." I said, "What happened to her?" She got hit by a coal truck. And I just completely went numb. And I couldn't, for some reason, I just could not understand what had taken place. And when the doctor walked out and he just shook his head no, that was just a sign letting us know that she couldn't be saved. And it was a very sad day. I walked in there and I saw her. And what made it so hard on me was when she got into the fire service back in 1997 with the W.R. Castle Fire Department, a department I just so happened to be a lieutenant at and a training instructor. I trained her. She and I formed a bond over the years. We never dated, nothing like that. It was always professional, but just that close bond that we shared. She was a single parent. I was a single parent. We often talked. We were good friends for a long time. And I just could not understand and accept the fact that I lost a colleague in the line of duty like this. So going through all the funeral and everything like that over the next coming days, I really started evaluating my life. Being a single parent, raising my daughter, she was a single parent raising her daughter. That could have just as easily been me. And I just come to the consensus that it's time for a new career. And that's when I made the transition into federal law enforcement.
So, what was that transition like? You just went through a very tragic event. You lost a very good friend.
Yeah, it was difficult. I'm not going to lie. I mean, each time I go on shift, I mean, we as a firefighter, police officer, EMS worker, you always know that it could happen, and there's a potential that you've got a 50-50 shot whether something serious is going to happen to you or not when you go on shift. You just never know. But over the coming, I guess you would say throughout February, it really hit hard when February the 25th came because my mother passed away. So I had to deal with the death of my mother. I just had lost a close friend. And I got tired of carrying my radio. I got tired of responding to fires. I had reached my point that I was total burnout. I was done. I didn't even want to go to work on shift. It got so bad that when I was selected for this federal career, all the vacation time and sick time, everything I had saved up, I just walked in and I turned to the chief's office and I laid my letter down on the chief's desk and he said, "What is this, Chief Dixon?" Like, "What is this?" I said, "This is my notice. I'm done." I said, "When I walk out these doors, I'm done as a full-time firefighter. I'll stay a volunteer and I'll help as much as I can, but I'm done. I've had enough." And I don't think they took me serious. I think they just thought, well, he just needs a break for a couple of weeks. Well, that couple of weeks turned into, I gave them to June of 2010, where I remained as a volunteer. And they wanted me to remain as a volunteer because, again, I was a senior firefighter. I knew all the apparatus, not only fighting fire, but as an engineer. I could work an ambulance, I could work a fire engine. It didn't matter. Wherever I was needed, I would go when they called me. And they didn't want me to go. They tried to actually talk me out. I remember a couple of different conversations from some different colleagues, "Don't go. This is not the right time. You'll get through this." And I just had enough. I had had enough. So my application was already in, which it had been in from around right after we lost Krista, and I knew the severity of my mother's illness. I had already applied for this position, which was a correctional officer. And just so happened right after her passing, it was within a week of her passing, I got the phone call, "Mr. Williams, you've been selected. This is your start date, April the 13th. Please be sure to show up dressed in this manner, and you'll be ready to roll." So I literally took off the entire month of March to mentally prepare myself for this new career. So I burned all my sick time, all my annual leave, and I began my new career. And it was a blessing in disguise because it completely took me out of my element. Going through all these different things with the fire department, whether it was tragedy, whether it was the camaraderie during some of the public events that we would hold, just had to have that break.
So, you walk into the Federal Bureau of Prisons.
Yes.
Where was your first facility, and what was it like going from the fire service into the prison system?
I knew that it would be law enforcement based, where I had been a deputy sheriff 2003 to 2005. I did that part time. I already was well aware of some law enforcement. And the firefighters at the Paintsville Fire Departments back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s were actually auxiliary police officers for large events, like public events. And when I started working for the Federal Bureau of Prisons, I worked in a penitentiary, United States Penitentiary, Big Sandy in eastern Kentucky. And that place was rocking and rolling, I'll tell you. It wouldn't be nothing uncommon to have to respond to multiple emergencies throughout an 8-hour shift. It wouldn't be uncommon to have to work a double shift. And just the knowledge that you obtain in such a short period of time. I remember going to the academy, which is located down in Georgia, Glenn County, Georgia. But we refer to it as Glencoe. That's the FLETC Center, Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, which trains all the Bureau of Prisons staff. When we were there, ICE was real big. Their presence was real big with their training, and so was the Border Patrol. So multiple federal agencies train at this facility. And it's an old Navy base. So you have driver's training, how you can tactically drive buses, police cars, different style of vehicles. You've got classroom, you have firearms, you have hands-on. It's just the training is just everything. But in your time off, you're close to the beach. You're able to go relax and just blow off some steam. It was enjoyable. I really did enjoy that career. Being 6'8", 250 pounds, not too many people mess with me. And I enjoyed the career. I spent 12 years at USP Big Sandy. And at the end of that 12 years, I was kind of going through a period of burnout because I felt like I'd gone as far as I could go. I had tried to promote up at that facility as a lieutenant, but things just never worked out in my favor. And I put in for another facility, actually two facilities, FCI Manchester and FNC Lexington. And I was best qualified at Manchester first, and then a week later at Lexington. And I was kind of afraid about going to Manchester because it was twice the drive was what I was already doing. So I went to my warden and I talked to him, and he was able to help me get to Lexington as a lieutenant. And I was a lieutenant there for a couple of years. And when I noticed I started getting sick, I had a lot of unusual swelling in my ankles, my knees, my abdomen. Never could really make a lot of sense of that. I put in for another department where I would be an educator, an instructor. So I instructed new and existing staff of the prison facility in a variety of different courses. But December the 1st of 2022, my symptoms had become so severe, I actually had to go to the emergency room. From my years of being an emergency medical technician, I was displaying signs and symptoms of congestive heart failure. Well, heart problems run in my family with my father on his side. And so I ended up going to the emergency room, and lo and behold, I was actually diagnosed with cirrhosis of the liver, which was kind of ironic because I'm not a drinker. I don't drink alcohol. I never have been. I've never abused any alcohol whatsoever, but they refer to it as non-alcoholic cirrhosis. And I just thought it was weird, but I went through all the different appointments with different doctors, and they actually narrowed it down to where it is actually hereditary. It's a genetic disease called alpha-1 antitrypsin. Sometimes if you ever hear of cirrhosis of the liver being referred to as non-alcoholic, you need to ask your physicians to test you for alpha-1 antitrypsin, which commonly affects the liver and affects the lungs. In my case, it didn't bother my lungs as of yet, but on being diagnosed, I started getting sick much more frequent, but on a more frequent basis, I guess you could say, with the difficulty breathing, the swelling. And I even had some of my doctors tell me I was being seen by, I think, at least 5 or 6 doctors. I could remember some of the doctors saying, you need to consider retirement, going ahead and medical now.
So you were still actually you had this diagnosis, and you were still maintaining your right.
Yeah, I was still working. And I can recall some of my students in some of the classes that I was teaching. Mr. Williams, you okay? You all right? I'd kind of stumble a little bit, have to brace myself, hold myself up against a chair or sit down or something. But what really set things in motion is during these breaks and stuff throughout working my shift, when I go to the restroom, I would pass a lot of blood with my bowels. And this become very noticeable. So I started having to be treated for that. And that was due to what is called esophageal varices, which is like varicose veins in your lungs. Not your lungs, I'm sorry. Varicose veins in your legs or in your arms or your waist. It's only in your esophagus. And they're very vulnerable to rupture. There are actually people who die from a ruptured an esophageal varices. I'm starting to get tongue-tied. But there have been known deaths due to the rupture of the esophageal varices. So throughout my entire illness of 2 years, let's say 23 months, because that's what it was exactly with the University of Kentucky Medical Center. It was 23 months before I switched hospitals. I had, I believe it was 57 or 58 bands put in my esophagus to contain these esophageal varices. And throughout that period of 23 months, I don't know how many ruptured, but I know that I spent a lot of time in the emergency room. I spent several times I was admitted to the hospital. And I was also even diagnosed of being a diabetic June of 23. I believe that's correct. No, June of 24. I'm sorry. And it was a wild ride, I'll tell you. If the doctors, they look at you like they're sympathetic, like they're trying to tell you, hey, you're going to die, but not tell you you're going to die. And I had accepted death. I knew it was coming. And there are several points throughout that illness that I was ready to give up. I had just lost all hope. But, my faith being what it is, and the relationship that I have with the Lord that I have, He kept me grounded. He kept me focused. And my third book, this one right here, it's titled, You're Just Not Sick Enough. I listened to that for 23 months at the University of Kentucky Medical Center. You're just not sick enough for a liver transplant. And I never could understand that because I was at the hospital more than I was ever at home. And I finally reached a boiling point that I reached out to a friend, Kyle, that I talked about earlier. We grew up in fire service together, and he knew of another friend that we had who recently had went through a liver transplant at the University of Cincinnati. So Kyle put me in touch with my other friend, Mike, and we had a conversation while I was actually laying in the hospital bed. at University of Kentucky. He gave me all the contact information that I needed, and while I was still there in that hospital bed, I reached out to the University of Cincinnati Medical Center, their liver transplant team. Explained everything that was going on. She set up the appointment for me immediately, and November the 4th of 2024 was my first appointment. Exactly 2 months to the day, January the 4th, almost on the hour, I was laying on the operating table receiving my new liver. I spent the period of 2025 recovering, went through another divorce in November, and to this day, it's just me and my daughter and our two pets, and just keep pushing forward. I've had a lot of blessings throughout my life.
So down
You know,
down in Kentucky, you were at the University of Kentucky for
medical center.
the medical center, and they're telling you can't get a liver transplant, basically.
You're just not sick enough. That was
Yeah.
the exact phrase that I listened to for 23 months.
Well,
That's why my third book has got that title.
the
Which is
question
pretty
arises.
amazing.
The question arises of, well, how sick do you need to be to get a liver transplant? So
Well, that's what I said. It's exactly what I told the doctor. I was like, "How do you want me to be dead when I come in here next time? Will I be eligible then?" You know, I was pissed off. I got so mad. I got so tired of seeing that one doctor all the time because it never changed. You're just not sick enough. That's how we closed out every office visit. You're just not sick enough. And then when I get to Cincinnati, they tell me that I'm the perfect candidate. And their program of their liver transplant team is so much more aggressive than what Kentucky could ever hope for. I was so disappointed with the University of Kentucky because that is the pinnacle of healthcare in the state of Kentucky. Now, if you have heart problems or you have fractures, some other sort of injuries, they're top notch. But now their liver transplant program was nothing but a pure disappointment. And that's what got me to write that book. And I'm actually reaching out to some production companies and producers trying to get a movie made about it. I've already got the screenplay and everything in motion. And right now we're just looking for funding. I've already got a producer who wants to make the movie, but she's an independent producer. She doesn't have the financial resources. So we're trying to find funding to make a movie. Back in 2010, I was in a movie titled Let It Be War, and I done that as a favor. I wasn't even paid for it, but my scene just happened to be the turning point of that movie, and it was pretty amazing. So if we could get this movie made about You're Just Not Sick Enough, that would be phenomenal. I've got another screenplay about my biography, and I'm writing another screenplay about 1926 legacy. If I can get everything to take off as I hope, I have a series of film that I would love to have that be based on true stories. And the title, I ain't going to reveal the title, but it would be in regards to emergency responders, police, fire, and EMS who's lost their life in the line of duty. And it would be all based on true events. I don't know if you could remember back in the 1980s, William Shatner used to host a television show called
yes,
Rescue 911.
yes,
And
yes.
a friend of mine, we were talking about that here recently, and I thought, man, this would be so amazing if I could do something like that with that series. But you never know. We'll see what happens. I've already started a fourth book based on all the volunteer fire departments in Johnson County, Kentucky, the county seat for Paintsville. And I'm collaborating with a lot of my old colleagues, and we're trying to get the information lined out where I can get. I've already started the book. First chapter is done. Probably going to have about 15 or 16 chapters in, but I look forward to getting that book completed.
Is this writing books? You've dealt with a lot of trauma. Do you believe that this is an outlet for you?
Yes, I do. It's a new outlet. It kind of come on unexpectedly. Going through the roller coaster of my marital problems there in the tail end of 2025, starting in August is when I started the biography. And by the end of December, the biography was finished. I could have had it done much quicker, but I had to pause often because of the divorce and everything. Other things just took precedence. But by the end of December, I had the biography finished. And then for the month of January in 2026, I wrote 1926 Legacy. And then my third book, it only took me 4 days to write. Because once I commit to something, I stay on it until it gets done. I'd start at daylight in the morning, and I'd work all the way up to bedtime at dark. So I was just typing away.
It's amazing when you get into writing, and I've done a lot of it. I have
Absolutely.
two short memoirs, but it's amazing when you get something in your head, and once
Yeah, you
it's
can't
there,
get it out.
you can't get it out.
can't-
It's like you got to get it on writing, right? Get it on paper and get it out there before it disappears outside your brain, right?
Yeah, it's the information that I was able to. I still to this day, it amazes me how I was able to reflect and remember a lot of these stories my dad had shared with me. And some of the fires and stuff that I had worked in the past, I had forgot about until we revisited the conversations, and then little flashbacks would appear. But the Lord blessed me with putting this information down in the form of books, and I would really like to see my third book turn into a movie because the story itself, not only does it promote education and awareness of alpha-1 antitrypsin, it will be a faith-based movie as it is a book. And no matter the challenge throughout that period of illness and even through the recovery, Lord's always there with you. He never left my side. And he was the only one that I could truly lean on. The marital roller coaster that I was going through, I couldn't depend on my wife for nothing. During the last 6 months of our marriage, there was just nothing there. We were just more or less roommates. And I hate to say that, but it's the truth. But it was also therapy, I guess you could say, writing these books, taking my mind off the present, delving into the past a little bit. It was kind of a therapy for me. But now it's become a hobby. I really
And,
enjoy it. It's fun.
and you've also played guitar. That's
Oh
another
yes,
outlet.
absolutely. I've actually started 2 bands throughout my lifetime. Both of them were gospel bands. The first band only lasted a couple of years. It was named Walking in Grace at the Hager Hill Free Will Baptist Church, also located in Johnson County, where I was a member. We were all members of. And at that time, it consisted of me, my wife, and 2 others, a rhythm player and a bass player. My wife would sing, and I played lead guitar. Everything was acoustic. And then the second band I started was a bluegrass band. That was titled Bluegrass Station. As of, I think it was January, either January or February, I stepped down. And we had been playing for, oh gosh, 4 or 5 years, I guess. But I stepped down, just kind of a period of burnout, I guess you would say. But I've played all kinds of music throughout my life, rock and roll, country, gospel. I was real big with Kiss and AC/DC and ZZ Top and stuff like that, the old traditional rock and roll band growing up. And, Ace Frehley, that's who I always looked up to playing guitar. I copied his technique. And I love music. Music is therapy in its own. You play the right kind of music, and you're able to just let it soak into your mind, kind of take you away from reality for a few minutes. It's also therapy. I mean, you just get away from what's in front of you and just have that moment of quiet time, I guess you could say. Peace.
Your family has your lineage of the family being involved in the fire service. What's that mean to you?
I tried to preserve our legacy, our history of our family. My family at one time was, I'm not going to refer to them as a prominent family, but we were well known in the city of Paintsville. My family owned a historical theater that was constructed in the 1940s that was called the Royal Theater. And my dad has shared many stories with me. I'll throw some names at you and see if you recognize. Tex Ritter. Does that name sound familiar?
Yeah, absolutely.
Tex Ritter has been to the Royal Theater in Paintsville. He was actually personal friends with my great uncle, which would be my grandfather's baby brother. And they were friends for many years. Tex Ritter's guns that he used in the Westerns, there were 2 of them, 2 revolvers. They were stolen in Paintsville. And there was rumors circulating for a long period of time, either a certain individual had those guns or they had been thrown into Paint Creek. Neither story could be verified, and the individuals that had that information since then have passed on. So it's kind of, nobody will ever know now. But another name I'll throw at you, Jay Silverheels. Do you recognize that name?
Yes.
Tonto from the Long Ranger. My dad has rode Tonto's horse, and the horse's name was Scout. And he's also been to Paintsville. The original King Kong, the very first King Kong. I have a picture of that with my great uncle Kenneth driving down 2nd Street, being hauled on the back of a tractor trailer. It stood roughly about 15 to 18 feet tall, and just as it looks on film is how it looked in person. And I have that picture. And my great uncle was a very political individual. He was personal friends with Richard Nixon and with Ronald Reagan. Only with Ronald Reagan, it was when he was governor of California. And there's actually a picture with my great uncle and his wife, my Aunt Pauline, who were with Ronald and Nancy Reagan. I guess I'm not sure where they were at the time the picture was taken, but he was governor. And he was so young. They were all so young at that picture. My cousin has that picture to this day. I'm sure there's some more individuals that I could probably name. They're not coming to me at this particular moment. Those are the ones that stood out. But we also had a family-owned flower shop. My grandmother started in the 60s. That flower shop is still open today, although my grandmother passed away in 2013. She sold the store and retired in 95. But another family now runs my grandmother's flower shop, and it still retains the same name, Williams Floral in Paintsville. And my dad and my mother both were in politics. Mom was on the school level, dad was city council, and I was with the fire department. It's those small towns like that. I mean, you learn who the people are, the residents of the city. And it wasn't nothing uncommon to be able to, when you mention a name, oh, yeah, I know who that person is. But as far getting back to the fire department question, I wanted to preserve the legacy of my family's tradition in the fire service. That was also part of the reason that I named that book 1926 Legacy. It's not just my family's legacy. So many other families have been involved with that department, I guess you would say, perseverance over the many years. That July this year is actually the 100-year celebration. I think it's July the 6th, if I'm not mistaken. But that is the birthday for the fire department, 100 years of operation. And there has been so many ups and downs, but they're still going strong.
Paintsville, is that a coal mining community?
Yes, everything up and down Route 23 in the state of Kentucky, in some form or fashion, had a relationship with the coal community. Now, from Louisa, which is more north, down to Pikeville, Letcher County, those are more coal communities. You had deep mining operations like Martin County Coal, Pontiki, Martiki, so many different coal mines. I don't know all the names, but I know that there are some of the biggest deep mines or deepest deep mines are in eastern Kentucky. And a lot of the mines no longer are in operation as they once were. It wasn't uncommon back in the 1980s or even the 1990s. Most of the automobile accidents that we would respond to had a coal truck involved in it. Either a car pulled out in front of the coal truck and the coal truck couldn't get stopped because of the heavy weight. There was a problem with everybody being overloaded at one point in time. That finally come under control. But still, when we lost our coal industry in eastern Kentucky, it really hurt the economy, tragically hurt the economy. It was like losing a family member because everybody relied upon it so much. Even the major coal operations, there were smaller coal operations that also existed. I myself worked in the mines for 2 years, running an excavator and a dozer. And that was in 2001 through 2003. I quit there, and then I went to the sheriff's department part-time. And even when I was working in the mines, that was only a part-time job. They wanted me because I was an EMT, because they're required to have somebody medically trained on site when they're in operation producing coal. So there was 3 or 4 of us that they hired, and they got tired of us seeing us sit in the office all day. Like, why don't you come out and run some equipment? Let's teach you something. Absolutely. So that wasn't just another, a trade that we were able to learn throughout that period of working there.
You've done the correction side, which I said this before the podcast. That is doesn't get talked enough about. It's that is a stressful career field. I know people personally in it. It's part of the first responder community. You're just on the inside of the walls dealing with it.
Yes.
But if you were to have to sit and talk to a person of the first responder community right now that's carrying a lot of heavy weight with them, what would you tell them?
Whether you're working fire, EMS, or law enforcement outside of the fence and serving the community, don't hold this stuff in. Don't let it build up. Find somebody to talk to. If you're in church, which I pray that you are, talk to your pastor. They are great counselors. They're able to help you get some of that burden off of your shoulders. Talk to your best friends. There's kind of a dark humor you and I were talking about earlier on, that between colleagues, that sometimes we'll crack a joke or something. The community don't really recognize what we're talking about, and they think it's disrespectful, but it's just how we blow off steam. It's not that we're being disrespectful. We're just trying to alleviate some of that pressure. As far as working inside the fence at a prison, I'm thankful for the knowledge that I have built upon throughout my different careers. But knowing what I know now, I wished I would have never went to the federal prison system, just because there are so much politics involved that is just ridiculous. So much favoritism that's involved amongst colleagues. We didn't have this at the fire department. We didn't have this at the ambulance service. I mean, people literally trying to get you in trouble on purpose. Some of the stuff that I have seen was totally uncalled for, but very unprofessional. And especially, I learned more about it when I became a supervisor myself. I had a captain. I won't say what his name was. He's almost as tall as me. I'm 6'8". He's probably 6'5". He had me beat by 100 pounds. He's a big guy. But I would like to have another conversation with him in a parking lot. I just have no respect for somebody who tries to deliberately go out of his way to put other employees' careers in jeopardy. I saw it firsthand, totally uncalled for. I mean, you have people who are willing to put their life on the line, hold down a job, and have to deal with all the headaches of working inside of a prison system. The stuff you have to deal with, not only from the inmates, but your fellow staff, your lieutenant, your captain, your executive staff being the warden and the associate warden, and other department heads throughout the institution. There's just a lot of nonsense that doesn't really need to happen, but it does. And it's
Yeah.
sad. I actually, very recently, back in the month of April and May, I actually had reached out to the prison system trying to go back. You have apparently a 3-year grace period from the day that you medically retired. My medical date was actually May 31st of 2023. So I had until May 31st of 2026. I had reached out trying to go back. I was wanting to go back just as an officer. Nothing special. I wanted to start out as an officer, maybe once again return to being a lieutenant, something along those lines. But it was prolonged. It was deliberately prolonged. I know it was deliberate. And it's sad that you have to deal with that stuff. Here I was, I've already medically retired, but I was willing to try it again. I'm actually glad that they turned me down. They wanted me to go to the academy again. I ain't done it. I will not do that. They can have it. And, although I've recovered from my liver transplant, I'm not 100% healthy. I have joint issues being so tall with my ankles and my knee. And every now and then I'll have something else bother me. But I don't miss the prison system. I do miss my friends, my colleagues. But the way that the federal prison system works really needs to be looked at from like the presidential level. It's an agency that I would never recommend anybody to go work for.
Been
And right
hearing
now
that.
they have such a hard time retaining employees. There's always something coming up. As soon as some people are eligible for retirement, they're going. They're getting out of there because they're just not happy. And the government itself does not make that line of work, attractive. Why would you, yeah, you can pay me $80,000 a year, but if you're not going to support the work that I do, what's the point of doing this? You're fighting a double-edged sword.
Mm.
There's no way of being successful. And I just can't say anything positive about the prison system anymore. But if I was to ever return to doing anything, I would go back to the Paintsville Fire Department as a chief. I would do that. And I've told some of my friends that that's the only way I'd go back as a chief. I would like to have that title under my belt before I'm completely done. I'd like to be a fire chief, but only at Paintsville, just because of my family history and preserve that legacy.
Yeah. Well, you never know, do you?
You never know. You never know. If I can get this movie made, that right there might set some things in precedence. Who knows?
So, Jimmy, it was great for you to take your time out today. That was a lot of story time and a
Yeah.
lot of good awesome information.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, I think we got to do it again because I don't think we covered half. So
You just let me know when.
we'll have to link up again. If you don't mind, can you just hang on for 1 minute? I'll be right with you.
Absolutely.